Hi, everybody, and welcome to episode 60 of Show Us Your Deck. And today, my special guest is Letao Wong, and he is the creator of the Oracle of Mythic Heroes, published by Beyond Worlds. So, we're going to be talking to him today. I had some issues trying to connect. So, hopefully, everybody can hear me well, and I'm going to I'm waiting for his invite, and sorry for the tech snafu. Okay, let's see if we can. I think he's there. Hi.
Hi, hello, Chris. How are
Good.
you?
And you, I'm sorry, sorry for the tech issues. I was trying to log in and I messed up my setup and I went back in and didn't have my earbuds on. I don't know.
Hey, no worries, but we're here now, so that's good.
Thank you for being here. I know we had been back and forth trying to set up a date, and then I was on vacation, but I'm so glad that we're able to do this today. And also, for starters, I want to make sure I'm saying your name right. It's Letao, right?
Perfect.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect, cool. Yeah, because I'm like I don't want to butcher anybody's name, so.
Yeah, well, it's not a very common name.
No,
Yeah, so yeah.
yeah, I mean, and for I think it's so for me, when I read because I speak Spanish, I read it as is, but sometimes certain names have different. I usually
Of course.
I read it in Spanish, but usually in like the way I read it, it's kind of like with different languages or different names. I'll be able to pronounce it correctly. So
Yeah, yeah. No, but that's perfect. Yeah, it's a Latal. Yeah, yeah.
thank you so much. So welcome, as I was saying, and everybody that's joining now. This is episode 60 of Show Us Your Deck, which is a show where we talk about deck creators, tarot decks, oracle decks, and everything in between, whether they have been published or they are already out in the world, such as the Oracle of Mythic Heroes, which we're going to be talking about, which is a very cool project. And I was reading the book, and it's a very in-depth look at the stories, etc. But before we go into the deck itself, can you tell me a little bit about yourself and the viewers? Who is Litao? What's your
Mm.
zodiac sign? Because you're an astrologer, right? So you can
Correct. Yeah,
you can say your solar sign. You can say your big three, as they call
yeah,
them.
yeah,
Whatever
yeah.
you feel comfortable with sharing. And how do you
Right.
get started in this world of um, divination
Mm,
in particular?
mm.
Because I know you're
Yeah.
also a tarot reader,
Correct.
but
Yeah,
but
yeah.
also as an oracle creator, etc.
Right. Well, first of all, Chris, it's thank you so much for having me on your show. I've been watching your videos for quite a while, and I really enjoy a lot of the books that you recommended on your channel. Well, I have been a spiritual counselor since end of 2024, so it's about 10 years actually, and I'm located in Hong Kong, and uh, so my spiritual journey really started quite late compared to a lot of the other professionals we know, because I know some of the astrologers or psychics, they started when they were even a child, right? They had like an awakening when they were 6 years old or whatever.
Hmm.
For me, I started really late. I think my first encountering with astrology and mythology was when I was 24, 23, 24, and that was when I lived in Sydney, Australia. I encountered my first astrology teacher, and he was really, really different because I don't know, maybe if our audience, anybody has studied astrology, right? If you study astrology, generally speaking, the traditional way is you start with the planets and then the house systems, right? And what it means, and you just memorize them. But my astrology teacher never really taught me those things at the beginning. It was all about mythology. It was all about the intricate and fascinating stories between the gods and goddesses and the mortals. And then he will, bring this back to astrology and say, so you tell me, what do you think this planet means to you? So he would talk about the stories, for example, about Hermes. And then he would say, okay, well, the Roman counterpart of Hermes is Mercury.
Mercury.
So yeah, so even before I tell you the definition of the planet Mercury, you tell me what you get from this deity from ancient Greek mythology. And so he was very special and he was very different. And at that time, I felt a door just opened in front of me. Because, I grew up with very, very orthodox Chinese literature because I'm Chinese. And we never really had the opportunity to understand Western mythology, which is, of course, Chinese mythology is also fascinating. But my, how do I express this? My first encountering with the idea of West mythology, Greek mythology, and even this stack, Oracle of the Mythic Heroes, really only started when I was 23, 24, and that's how I got into the world of mythology. Yeah.
So, and your sign, if you want to
Oh
share.
yeah.
Uh,
So I'm a Cancer Sun and Capricorn Moon. Yeah.
oh, there you go. What's
Yeah, I'm
cardinal,
full
right?
moon child. Yeah. Sorry.
Both
Yeah.
cardinal, both of
Cardinal.
them.
Yeah. Cardinal water and cardinal earth. Yeah.
Yeah, look
Mm.
at you.
Yeah.
It's funny that you mentioned Hermes because I'm a Virgo, and
Oh.
that's my. I mean, I'm a Mercury ruled, obviously, and I
Uh-huh.
have a moon in Aries and Aquarius ascendant.
Oh,
Those are
I,
my favorite. Yeah.
I see. Well, my ascendant is Virgo, actually.
Oh, there you go. There you go.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
um, and thank you for sharing that. I think it's very interesting that you mentioned two things that you just mentioned. One of them is that the relationship to the planets itself, or to the stories that the planets represent, right? Uh,
Mm.
it's almost equally important, or even more important than learning the like I mean the practical side of things, I guess, because
Yeah.
once you understand the it's like theory and practice, right? Like like understanding um, what it means really, right? By the step by using
Yeah.
stories, which is what
Yeah.
mythology
Yeah.
basically is,
Yeah.
right? Like it's kind of like using stories to describe patterns, as you talk about the archetypes, etc., right?
Yeah.
As we
Yeah.
know, Joseph Campbell did,
Yeah.
Carl Jung did this as well, um,
100%.
and
Yeah.
yeah, so I think it's very interesting to like that is a very unique approach to astrology, which I know a couple of people that approach astrology that way, but you're right. A lot of people just focus on like, oh, first house means the self or whatever.
Mm,
You know what I mean? Like
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
there's no depth to it, so it's only going to be one dimensional. I think
Mm,
that's what I was trying to say, is that the by knowing myths related to either the planets or the planets associated, the gods associated with the planets, that gives
mm,
you
mm.
a lot of depth, and it's kind of like the wisdom of it is encoded in those myths, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I think, especially when I'm doing a readings, right? Even with, let's just use tarot as an example.
Hmm.
For example, personally, I tend to associate with the Empress card with Demeter or Ceres in Roman
Hmm.
mythology, and of course, the Death card is associated with Hades. So, for example, in a reading, when I see these two cards, let's say showing up together, the first thing is not about, okay, what does Empress mean? What does Death card mean? But for me, it's a bit like, okay, now it's Ceres meeting Hades. Well, Hades took Ceres' daughter away. He took Persephone. So when you put the mother now has to face the guy who abducted her daughter. So what's the emotion there? What's the feeling
Hmm.
there? And I think mythology helps us a lot in terms of interpreting a tarot as well. Yeah.
I love that too, because and obviously it's not necessarily related to astrology, but I think like when we are as diviners, right, which
Mm,
is not necessarily not that fortune telling is wrong or anything like that, but like as a the role of the diviner is a little bit different than the fortune teller, because the diviner will there are things that will come into play in a reading that are not necessarily uh as you say, the first thing that you think that you learn about that card, right? So
Mm,
you're gonna
yeah,
you're the way our intuition and our psychism works also is with our pool of knowledge, right? Like
yep,
whatever it's in our unconscious as well, but all things that we have learned, right?
yeah,
and
yeah.
and even our intuition, it's based on things that we have learned and experienced, through throughout our life, right?
Mm,
So
mm,
it kind of like triggers that. So I think like it's so interesting that you mentioned seeing those parallels in the cards, because it really um, you can give even more depth to the reading.
yeah.
Whereas if you're just seeing like, oh, Empress, well, you might be pregnant or you might have a new
Yeah.
creative endeavor or whatever, right?
Yeah, yeah, that helps a lot with our intuitive ability for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. So going a little bit, well, and also, and this is part of the first question too, but I forgot to mention it is, what is your favorite thing about being a diviner? About being I don't know how you like to call yourself. Apart, besides, I know you call yourself you're a spiritual counselor, obviously, but I don't know in terms of divination if you prefer like I'm a
Mm.
psychic, I'm an intuitive, I'm a reader, I'm just a reader, an
Uh,
oracle.
I think the best way, I always call myself a counselor because I am a counselor. I'm
Yeah,
a
of course.
certified
Yeah, yeah,
counselor
of
actually
course.
in Hong Kong. And so I think that's the best way. And the focus of my reading is really about counseling, to be honest. I'm less interested. I'm just talking about me. Yeah? I am less interested in making pure predictions for clients. And I think if a client is purely looking for a future prediction, generally speaking, they wouldn't come to me. There is an area in Hong Kong, it's called Wang Dai Xin, and there are a lot of fortune tellers there, the grandmas and grandpas there. And so I think they will go there. But when they come to me, I think they're looking beyond that. Yeah. So for example, I had experience when a client would come to me with a whole list of questions like, for example, will my boyfriend reply to my message? Okay, if he replies, what should I say? That kind of question. And I said, I'm sorry, I'm not the right reader for you. That kind of questions asked maybe a fortune teller because I'm not. I'm a counselor, but I use divinational tools. I use astrology. I use numerology. I use tarot and oracle cards to tap into your psychology. I understand how you're feeling, why you're feeling this way, and how we can improve. And I think that's what I really find interesting, and also where I can really use my talent, rather than just tell them your boyfriend will reply to your message, so you should reply to him right away. That kind of question.
So, and it's interesting that you say that too, but my now I'm interested to know if, even though that's not your approach, do you find yourself ever making a prediction that
Yeah,
and then,
yeah,
oh,
yeah, yeah,
it turned
yeah.
out to be
Well,
true, or
yeah,
it's you are really tapping into that source and you really make a prediction, but not from a place of I want to show off that I'm psychic, but
yeah,
more like I'm
yeah,
really tuned into what the client is
yeah.
going through.
Absolutely. So I think, of course, as a service provider, right, we do have to do our job. And if a client has a question about what could happen in the future, and we will tell them through reading the cards. But if I see something that is better, it's better for them not to know, then I will really ask them first. I'll say, well, are you sure you want to know this? Because I'm not sure if this is mm, helpful to you. Yeah. But you tell me, if you say whatever it is, I want to know now, and tell me now because I'm paying you, I will deliver the truth to them. But usually I will give them a choice. And if they ask me, why shouldn't I know? Then I will explain, during this whole process, whether this information will help them or actually distract them. Yeah.
That's yeah, that's cool. Do you ask them prior to starting the reading, or you ask them while you're in
While I'm reading.
while
While
you're
I'm reading.
okay?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, occasionally, I think I might have asked once or twice at the very beginning because I've had experience with that client, in which they purely just just wanted to know the prediction.
Mm.
They are not interested in counseling. They were not interested in therapy. They were not interested in their psychological health. They just want to know, like what I said, we just had a fight. Is he thinking about me now? Is he gonna send me a message and should I reply? And when you try to help them heal this insecurity, right, or this fear of abandonment in love and a relationship, they're not interested in healing. They want to know everything so that they can continue to manipulate the situation. And so when I see that, I understand that, okay, then my service, my intention to help them to heal is not appreciated. So I will just give them the prediction they need. And also at the end of the session, I might say, may I refer you to someone else in the future? Maybe they will be able to give a better service to you, yeah, in terms of prediction. Yeah.
I love that. I think that honesty is a very good part of
100% integrity.
yeah,
It's about
yeah,
integrity. Yeah.
integrity, honesty, and I also think that I mean we love those questions, right? When they ask those questions, I think that it is interesting when we're saying this type of things to a client and I'm not a certified counselor, so I kind of like go in the but I've always been very interested and well informed in psychology enough to be able to approach certain things, but I never diagnosed or I never, none of that. But it is interesting to me that when people say, this is, as you mentioned, like sometimes it is an issue of abandonment, sometimes it is an issue of self-worth, and things like that. And it is so sometimes you feel frustrated because you really want them to see the situation for what it is and really want to help them. But I think it's very important as a reader to also have that honesty with ourselves, and also, as you say, like maybe I'll refer you to someone else that can help you the way you want to be helped, right? And that's
100%. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's
Yeah.
totally fine too.
Yeah. I think it's similar to, let's say, a patient is seeing a doctor, right? I mean, I think the doctor's intention should not be whatever small problems you have, I'll fix it, but I won't cure the root of it so that you will keep coming back to me for consultation. My purpose is after 3 or 4, perhaps 5 consultations, reading consultations, I hope the client will be able to find their own enlightenment and say, I'm so glad that I came to you, but I no longer need to do readings because I feel much better now and I can move on. And that's really what I want to see.
I was just talking about this morning with my friend. We were talking about divination and not obviously I want people to that need a reading to come and get a reading. But I was talking about and using the example of doctors, whereas doctors don't want to, some doctors don't want to cure you. They just really want you to treat the symptoms.
Keep coming back. Yeah.
So you can keep coming back, obviously, and it speaks in a broader sense to the way we are dealing with our, we are brought up in different societies and with different, especially here in the U.S., like capitalism and more and more, and accumulation of wealth and this type of things, right? So I wanted to ask you also an interesting question, which was not in the prompts that I gave you, but may ask an astrologer also. Do you see you were talking about how you came late into this, what you consider late, into this later in life, into this type of work. Do you see that reflected in your astrology as well?
What do you mean by that? Can you clarify that question again?
For example, if you look at your chart, you can say oh, this really, I can see why I came later instead of some people that approach it when they're very young, or they have a inner awakening when they're big.
100%. Well, let's just say, okay, usually I think there are 3 things very important when we need to look at, right, on our astrological chart, especially if we're trying to understand what kind of professional path that we need to walk. The first thing, of course, is our sun sign, because eventually this is our ego, right? And what kind of qualities do we want to bring out? I always see the sun as the shining light, right, far away from us, and that's where we need to walk towards. And I think that's also the reason why a lot of people especially when they're younger, they cannot really identify with their sun sign, right? Probably they identify more with their moon because that's their natural emotional reaction, or their ascendant. That's the first impression that they give to other people. So I think the sun sign gives us a lot of hints about what kind of profession or what kind of work we need to do. For example, Chris, you're Virgo, and Virgo is all about service, right? And when I think of Virgo energy, I tend to think of Mary Poppins, the nanny who's taking care of everyone, making sure everything is organized, that kind of energy. And it doesn't mean that Virgo people, they all need to be nannies, but somehow they need to bring that kind of quality into their work, right? So if their profession is not about providing a humble service, but is more about, let's say, being an actor, right? And winning an award, probably that's a little bit different from the Virgo energy. And the second thing is the North Node of the Moon. And the North Node, I think a lot of astrologers are aware, it's really about the lesson that we need to learn and master in this lifetime. And it's specifically, if this person's North Node is in their 10th house or in their 6th house, which are related to our daily operation, work, and career. And I think that also tells us what kind of qualities we need to cultivate, right, in our career. And the third thing I think is the ascendant, or rising sign, because I usually see ascendant as the path we need to walk in order for us to get to the sun. So if the sun is the goal who we eventually need to be, either professionally or in our private lives, and the ascendant sign is through what manner or through what path we need to get to that sun sign. Yeah.
Yeah, I love
and
that.
of course
Yeah.
Yeah, and of course the easiest the option is if someone's sun sign and their ascendant sign are the same, right? And they will be easiest because the path they tend to walk is actually naturally leading to their sun sign. So yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Mm.
Do you I mean, this is obviously modern astrology, and you speak about it in your book, a little bit about how you follow it because it adds the more recently discovered planets, etc. as well, right? And it's kind of like what most people are more familiar with, even though there is more of a awareness now about Hellenistic or traditional astrology also happening right now,
Yeah.
which I think is great as well. But did you, I mean, and speaking to you as growing up in China, right? I mean,
Yeah.
in Hong Kong, you grew up in Hong Kong?
Yeah.
Yeah. So have you ever been as interested in Chinese astrology?
Mm.
And what are some of and this is just like an open question, obviously, but
Yeah.
what are some of the parallels that you find being practicing Western astrology
Yeah.
versus like traditional Chinese astrology, and
Yeah.
and how maybe that obviously is from your culture,
Mm.
kind of like meets and merges with your astrology practice,
Yeah.
if in any way.
Well, how do I describe this? So, even though, I mean, of course, China has this long history of fortune telling and their own systems. Personally, I have not studied it systematically enough. Let's put it this way. Even though they're so rich in this system and the knowledge, right? I mean, for example, when in the Western world, when we talk about Chinese astrology, perhaps people would think of the 12 animal signs, right? Like you're a rat, you're a dragon, you're a goat. What are you?
I'm a rat.
Oh,
I'm
oh,
a
me too.
I'm a wooden rat.
Me too. Oh, so we're the
Okay.
same age.
Yeah.
Born in the same year. Okay, cool. So yeah, but it's actually way more than that. When you really study the Chinese system, the so-called you are a rat or ox or whatever, it's just just like a tiny, tiny bit of the entire system. And I remember years ago I went to this Chinese fortune teller, and I just out of curiosity, I wanted to see how she worked with the system, and it was pretty much like 30 pages of things, and she needed to sit there to calculate everything for about probably 15 minutes or to 20 minutes, doing all her stuff and writing and page after page, and then we start the consultation. So it's not about oh, you're a wooden rat. Okay, so this is what it is. It's way more than that. It's a little bit like in Western astrology, you can't just say, oh, you're an Aquarius, so blah blah blah, right? It's more than that, and we all know that.
It's not a tick.
Um,
It's not a TikTok clip.
no,
Yeah.
no, no. Well, however, I do. The more I studied Western astrology and numerology, and the more I actually I have become more interested in the Chinese system, because there is some kind of interesting correlation between them. And sometimes when I see when I'm counseling a client, and I will actually look at both. I will start with my strengths, which is I started with Western astrology and divination system, and then I will look at their Chinese zodiac structure, and I'll be like, okay, so this is very interesting because they're pretty much saying 80% of the similar things. And then that gives me a further confirmation that this is what it is. Yeah.
I love that.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Go ahead.
it
Go ahead.
it yeah, but it's just there are not a lot of books in English explaining the Chinese system in a very easy way. Let's put it there, because at the end it is not easy. It's very complicated. Maybe if we have time next time we can talk about the Chinese system.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. Of
it's
course.
very
Yeah. Yeah. No. Whenever you're welcome. Whenever. Yeah. It's
yeah
just I find it. I figured I would ask you also because I've seen your post, and maybe we can talk about this near the end
yeah
about the year of the dragon and what that means for people,
yeah
or in general for the collective too. But yeah, most of what I've learned from which is not a lot, from Chinese astrology has been from feng shui books, you know.
mm, mm,
So it's like, but it is it is much more it is just like feng shui. It's like a lot more
mm,
complicated than just put a plant here or put a put a
mm.
crystal there, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So I think it's very interesting. But I've always been fascinated by by Chinese mythology, by and religious practices, and in
Yeah.
general, it's like one of my passions too. Um, so what were if you were to say, I mean, I know you had a teacher, astrology teacher, and or maybe different, obviously maybe a couple, right? But
Mm,
if you were to say some of the major book influences that inform besides having a physical teacher, obviously, which is also always very important,
yeah.
if possible, and whoever has access to them, right?
Right. Yeah.
Some of the major book influence that help you kind of like form.
Mm.
I know you definitely mentioned Anthony Lewis, which I have his book back from when I was a teenager.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sarah, Plain and Simple. It was like one of a big one.
Yeah.
But which other books that you
Right.
can,
Right.
if you have any that you want to mention?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, well, first of all, Anthony Lewis, right? Mr. Lewis, I was very fortunate, back in, probably 12, 13 years ago when I was in New York. He came all the way from Connecticut by train to meet me because I
Wow.
said, I would love to meet you. I love your books. The first book by him that I really loved was called A Tarot Beyond the Basics.
Oh,
That book, right?
that was the sequel. This is
That
the second book, I
I
think.
yeah, but I read that
No, no,
first before the Tarot
yeah, that's what
Simple.
I'm saying.
Yeah,
That is funny.
yeah.
That's
Yeah, so I just love that book, right? So that's a thick book. I carried it all the way to New York, and I said, "Can you sign it for me?" And then we sat in a cafe and we chatted for like 2 hours. Yeah, so he was very nice. And of course, there are another two books that I would highly recommend if our audience would be interested. If it's in for astrology, I'll recommend a book by Miss Jane Spiller, who unfortunately passed away many years ago.
mm,
And the book is called Astrology for the Soul. That was a fascinating book. I'm sure you have read it as well. It's great. It's talking a lot about the lunar nodes and the life lessons, right? So that's something I highly recommend. And you don't need to have any deep knowledge about astrology. Anyone can pick it up and just read it. And the second book is more for a tarot. I don't know if our American audience will know this name. She is a British lady. I think she's already in her 60s or 70s. Her name is Lydia Angelis. And she
Oh yeah,
wrote,
yeah, yeah. She wrote a couple of books, Tarot Theory and Practice, right? Like,
yeah, yeah,
no,
yeah.
no, no. Sorry, she wrote Witchcraft Theory and Practice, but she wrote Tarot something something. Now I remember. Yeah,
No,
yeah, I
you're
remember
right.
the.
That was the name, Harold Theory and
Oh,
Practice.
that was the.
That's by Light Angel.
That's what it
Yeah,
was. Oh, there you
the
go.
green
Yeah.
book. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You were right. Yeah. So yeah, so I also really liked her approach to tarot. But I'm not sure if her book would be the best for beginners. I think it may be perhaps her writing and her understanding. I feel it's a little bit more for advanced readers, right?
Yeah, I
But
think it was
definitely,
more. It has like a little bit more something maybe more in depth that
yeah.
beginners might not necessarily be looking at.
100%. Yeah. So those
But
are the two books I would
I love
recommend. Yeah.
that, and I mean, you know what it was is that the witchcraft. I'm just looking at as we're talking. The witchcraft book was also Witchcraft Theory and Practice, and that's why I was
Uh,
remembering
uh,
that. Oh, maybe that's not the name, but yeah, I remember that book came out in the 90s, I think. So yeah,
yeah.
so we were
Yeah.
probably
Yeah.
both teenagers when that book came out,
100%. Oh, yeah.
or
Oh, yeah.
maybe it was
Yeah.
2002, maybe I don't know, but it was like early 20s, maybe.
Early
But
20s. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
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 But yeah, I remember I have those books, and I agree with you. And I think a lot of times, and that's not to call anything, not to say anything bad about that book at all. It's just like as you say, like sometimes beginners can feel a little bit intimidated
Sure. Yeah.
because a book might be a little bit more complicated to what they're, if you don't know anything
Yeah.
about it, then you have to be
Yeah.
more,
Yeah.
you have to approach it a little bit more uh ba- more basic. Which
Yeah.
reminds me, I mean, there used to be a book called Tarot for Beginners. Now there's another
Mm.
book called Tarot for Beginners, which is Barbara Moore. But the one
Mm.
before that, I can't remember the name. P. Scott Hollander or something like that, who passed away
Okay.
also. But that book
Mm.
was a lot like that book when I first got it, I was like, this is not a beginner's book. It was much more confusing than it was. But it was a very popular book, by the way. But I was
Uh,
was published by Llewellyn, which is the one that
uh,
published
yeah.
Light
Yeah.
of the Angels book as well.
Huh.
Okay, so that's very interesting. I think Anthony Lewis, that Beyond Basics, I think is even more approachable than Plain and Simple. Actually,
Mm.
it's like
Mm.
it's more. I guess it's like more practical. Plain and Simple is more like going card by card and
Yeah. Yeah.
like getting that. But that was the style of the books back then too. It's like
Yeah.
more description, etc. And he used Robin Wood's tarot, which
Oh,
is
yeah. Yeah.
was one of my favorites too. She also passed away, I believe,
Mm.
last year.
Mm. Mm.
The Robin Wood, the artist. So going into Mythic Oracle of the Mythic Heroes, right? Which again, where did this idea come from, and what was it something else
Mm.
before you decided to make an oracle? Like, were you trying to
Mm.
write a book and then decided, let me make this into an oracle? Was it always an
Um,
oracle? Was it always an oracle in your head? Like, where did this come from?
yeah. Well, actually, from the beginning, it was the idea to create an Oracle deck, actually. And what I realized is because, when I actually have a different version of Oracle of the Mythic Heroes just used by myself, yeah, which is a little bit different from this published version. And I created that a long time ago. And I would use that in my own reading, right? Because I'm sure, a lot of readers do that. You create your own deck and just for your personal use. And the the feedback from my clients are very good from that bag. And some people would say, oh, where did you get this set? And I said, well, I just printed it from my own printer from at home. They're not published, right? And then slowly I felt, maybe this is something that people would love to use. And of course, in order for people to use this deck, you need to have a book.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I really enjoyed working during this whole process of creating this Oracle deck is to write a very nice guidebook. Which, to be honest, to me, it's a shame because when I see a lot of the Oracle decks on the market, I feel, and I understand why that's the way it is, because maybe people are more drawn to the art when they buy decks rather than the writing, right? And But for me, because this is a mythology-based book, only by understanding the mythological stories behind it can we find the meaning and the lessons, right? So I think it's very important for me to actually put a lot of effort into creating the stories, writing the stories, and then writing the teaching part. And that's why the result is that this guidebook is this thick.
Wait,
And you don't, yeah,
no, no, go
sorry.
ahead, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Yeah, and you don't see that a lot in Oracle decks, right? So, most of the decks, maybe the cards are really nicely done, but the guidebook is like 3 pages. That's it. And that's not my intention. I want to create something that is good for people to read, and then they will go to the card and to use the card. And yeah, so from the beginning, it was I wanted to write those stories in my own as my own rendition of Greek mythology. And another thing is there are a few oracle decks out in the market, also with the Greek Roman mythology themes, but they are very heavily focused on gods. So they're more about Zeus, right? Apollo, Aphrodite, right? But to me, I think the really fascinating parts of Greek mythology is the stories of the mortals rather than the gods. And I really want people to know the stories with those people because we are mortals. And I think all those human experience and conditions that we see that happened for the mortal heroes and heroines are actually our lessons rather than the gods. And that's my inspiration basically. And that's
Yeah,
how I really wanted to create this deck.
I like how you explained that in the preface. You mentioned that that if the gods are the less like the store like the archetypes,
Yeah,
then the heroes are kind of like the
the
archetypes
examples.
for the
Yeah,
lessons, right? Then the heroes have the example of the lessons. So I really like that
yeah,
because it is really bringing and to be honest, most stories there are always gods involved, in it
yeah.
because
True.
obviously it's all intrinsically tied to each other,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
It's
yeah,
interlinked.
yeah.
So I really like it, and and yes, it is a very detailed book. But I find that your way of writing is very easy to understand, and then you have a great voice writing also. So when I was reading, I'm like, oh, this is like it. I remember when I was a kid, I would sit in the library, I watched your interview with Elliot Adam, which I
Mm,
love Elliot. And I really enjoyed that interview. And when you were mentioning that you didn't get exposed to it as a kid because of, obviously where you were raised
yeah.
and the type of literature available, it made me a little sad in a way, but also made me very appreciative of like sometimes you think, oh, we take things for granted,
Yeah,
especially
yeah, yeah.
I mean, I grew up in Puerto Rico, which has we have our own different mentality than here in the US, but at the same time, it is like, oh, I was able to see this stories as a kid
Mm,
and to expand and my mind and to like
mm,
get excited and get angry at it,
mm,
at the stories, etc. So, but I really like when you told that story because it also makes me wonder how different it is it's like when someone encounters religion as an adult,
yeah.
and then I go like, oh, wow, because you're going into it with a very different perspective than someone that grows up in a religion,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
that its images are very they might be jaded based on wherever they grew up or whatever it's
Mm,
worship,
mm,
in that area as well. So I really like that. But the book really does a great job at not just explaining the myth, right? So talking about the myth, I kind of you give a quote, you talk about the myth, if I'm not mistaken, and then you go into the teaching where you
yeah,
actually give an example of a reading that you have done,
yeah.
or an experience that you have had with and then kind of like when that card pops up, how what the message was, how it can be interpreted, etc. So I really
Yeah.
think the myth and the teaching really ties it together. And I agree with you. I mean, I get decks from people all the time, and obviously, I'm thankful and appreciative. Part of the job that I do here. Uh, you know, uh,
Mm.
and I don't like or it's not that I don't like. It's say like I would like certain decks to have more explanation, and I know a lot of times it's a publisher issue
Yeah.
because of
Yeah.
the length of pages. So I don't hold it against necessarily the creator or the author, but sometimes
Yeah.
it is
Yeah.
that, and I really like a lot of the times people that self-publish a deck have that
Mm.
liberty to add everything that they want to the book,
Yeah.
etc. But
Yeah.
sometimes the publisher will only give you like this is the so you have a great publisher that will that allow you to do all.
Yeah, I'm really grateful to them, to be honest. I mean, to be honest, the original manuscript was actually 20% longer than this.
Oh my
Because
God.
I wrote so much, because I love writing, I'm a writer. So yeah, when I submitted to them, and of course we had meetings, we talked back and forth, and they said, okay, we understand your intention. You want to make it a book, an actual book, right, within the deck, rather than just 3 pages explanation. But they said, people would also like to not to spend too much time reading things and then finally understand the cards, right? So let's just condense it a little bit. So that's the result. But I also feel that sometimes, why publishers would have that expectation is because probably most of the people who use Oracle or tarot cards, maybe they prefer something short. They're not, the ones who would read, thousands of books. Or let's say we don't have a lot of Oracle or tarot card users who would do that. And so I hope that this is probably would need efforts from both sides, right? If
Yeah,
our audience, if
yeah, I agree. I
yeah,
think, I mean, well, it's just like right now we're, especially obviously from a marketing perspective, we're in an
yeah,
era where people are looking for instant gratification,
yeah,
So it's like
yeah,
if they pull, I mean, I think it's very interesting that, you pull a card, if you pull a card and then you see the title and then you see the keyword, then it's easier because you remember, it's kind of mnemonic, right? Like you
yeah, yeah,
remember what it
yeah,
is about. But I do think I really like to get into the head of the author and see like
mm,
what were they thinking when they did this, for
mm,
good
mm,
or
mm.
bad, right? I
Yeah,
don't like
yeah, yeah, yeah.
which is really the psychology of it. It's like what was going through your head because
Yeah.
sometimes I don't like some artwork that I see
Mm,
in certain cards, but then I read the book and then I fall in love with it. You know what I mean? Or
yeah,
the
yeah,
same thing happens to me with certain movies.
yeah,
I'm like off put by some movie or the way it's made, but then I listen to an interview with the director or the writer, and then I'm
yeah,
like, oh, of course. And then I go and I'm like, this is a masterpiece. And it's
yeah,
not that it changed my, it's really like I was able to tap into whatever it is that was working in their head.
yeah.
And then I'm like, oh, I can see your vision now. So
Mm,
I think like well-written books, whether they're long or short, and I agree with you, like it has to be efforts on both parts.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
I think they're very important, especially I rather have a short book than no book, but
Mm,
but longer books. But I'm a Virgo, so I'm like a bookworm.
ah,
Anyway,
good,
so
good. Yeah.
but um but yeah, sorry, I got carried away with that one. But so when you were creating this, I mean, out of all the heroes, right, and out of all the deities and all these myths, what was your creative process when you decided, okay, these are the ones that I'm going to take. I'm going to do this 36, which are, if I'm not mistaken, it represents the wheel of the year, right? Like, I mean, not the
Yeah,
wheel of the year,
yeah.
but the 365 days
The
or
wheel,
whatever,
the,
right?
the
Yeah, yeah, the wheel, right?
astrological wheel.
Yeah,
Yeah. Mm,
astrological wheel. Yeah, 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 yeah. So, which would be a year, right?
mm,
Basically, if we were talking
mm,
those terms, right?
mm,
What was your decision process to
mm,
see
mm,
this is who I want here, and then I don't want
mm,
these other people for whatever, for time constraints
mm,
or for
mm.
structure constraints.
Right. So, of course, I write those stories, even before I created this deck, right? And I know what kind of heroes or heroines that I feel very connected to. But when I was creating this deck, I was actually thinking, okay, I want this to be a spectrum. If you know what I mean. I want these lessons to cover all different kind of things. For example, in astrology, we have the masculine signs and the feminine
Mm-hmm.
signs. We have the yin and the yang and the different traits that all the 12 zodiac signs carry. And I want to have those 36 heroes or heroines to cover that entire chart, and so that when we're looking for guidance, it gives us enough choices. Let's say it's just like, let's say we're using an astrology deck, right? And
Mm-hmm.
there needs to be Aries, and there's also needs to be Libra. Sometimes we need to embrace the Aries energy. Sometimes we might need to embrace the Libra energy more. And so when I'm thinking about that, I was, literally handpicking from all the writings that I have, which was probably, I would say, double the 36 heroes. And I was thinking, okay, which hero could represent the Aries energy the best, and what kind of stories that we can draw from them. And I had those keywords first, actually. So I had those heroes, and I wrote down probably one or two, sometimes three different keywords just for that one hero. And I'm thinking, okay, which one is the best? And yeah, so that's pretty much how I started. Yeah. And also, there are actually 40 cards. Yes. The other four is the lunar cycle, the four phases of the lunar cycle. And I'm using the four sacred creatures. Yeah. Pegasus, Medusa, yeah, sirens, and yeah, exactly, Sphinx. Yeah. So I'm using them to talk about the lunar cycle because I think they're also a very important part, apart from the 36 decans of astrology. Yeah.
I love that. How would you say, like, um, you know, when you're using these cards, right? And I know you give examples of spreads, right? But how would you, what is your, like, your preferred way when using these cards? Like, do you use that?
Yeah.
Like, I know you have the spear
Yeah.
spread. I know you have the one, the single card, and then
Yeah.
you have the three
Yeah.
card. But like, do you have a particular, not necessarily spread, but the way that you prefer to use these cards?
I think for our audience, always the best thing to do is daily card pull. And I can't emphasize that enough. And this has been, of course, recommended by a lot of readers out there. And I think it makes sense. Just every morning before you leave home, before you go to work, take a deep breath, pick a card. And you don't have to make sense of that card at that moment. Perhaps you can't connect with that message in the morning, but just have that at the back of our head, right? And just go through your day and just remember what that card is. And by the end of the day, it will make sense. And I think this is a very good practice for us to be self-aware. Let's put it this way. Yeah. To always know that, okay, what am I saying? What is my natural reaction towards situations? And what is also interesting personally for me is I might pull a card in the morning and the whole day, right, until the end of the day, I personally cannot connect that message, but I just noticed, wow, today that client that I just saw, this is a perfect card for her or for him. And I think this is almost like also a teaching for me, right, to understand, okay, so today you did a session with this client, and this is a message, actually, the thing that the client you're dealing with is going through. And that also helps me to understand my session. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that too because the daily carpool, like sometimes, as you say, like even with tarot in particular, which is even more cards, like 78
Mm,
cards. Sometimes you're like, what is the like? How does that even make sense? And then you realize like, oh, I watched this news on the, I saw this in the news, and they were
mm,
talking about this, and
yeah.
or they were talking about that, and I'm like, oh my gosh, of course, that
Mm,
of course that makes sense to the card because when we're dating, unless you're asking a particular question specific to something in particular,
mm,
if you do a daily poll, you can be like, what will I learn today? And you can learn many
yeah.
things, right? Or
Yeah.
things like
Yeah.
that, right? So I think
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
very,
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah. So I think that's
Mm.
very important. Um, do you mind if I pull a card and just like if you say something about it? Like, are you up for
Sure.
it?
Yeah.
You know,
Sure. Yeah. Let's do it.
and just I'm gonna just for so people let me think of a good question or just a message for everybody that's watching or that will watch this later, right? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
so I'm gonna I'm shuffling. This is just random, sorry. I So, do you want to tell me when to stop shuffling? Sorry.
Stop.
Okay. And then give me a number. One to whatever. One,
Four.
one, four.
Four.
Okay.
Four. Yeah.
Oh, oh. So we got 36. I believe this
Sacrifice.
is Pisces,
Mm.
right? No, no.
Correct. Yeah. This is
Pisces
Pisces
sacrifice.
energy. Yeah. So Patroclus, actually, there's a very interesting book. I actually highly recommend this. There's a fiction book to everyone. It's called Song of Achilles. I think a lot of people know by Madeline Miller. She's this amazing author. She wrote this whole story about how his love story with Patroclus, also, who was also his best friend. And the whole story happened during the Trojan War, right? When Achilles was not fighting. But the Greek army had to continue their battle, and so Patroclus, on behalf of Achilles, let's put it like he put on his Achilles armor and went to the battlefield, and so of course he was misunderstood by the enemy, the Trojans, and so the Trojans thought he was Achilles, so they killed him. And at the end of the day, so it was the whole story was about the sacrifice that Patroclus made for his best friend, also the love of his life, Achilles. And you can see on this picture, Achilles is holding him, and because his best friend made a sacrifice for him. And I think the message that I wrote in the book about this sacrifice is sometimes we need to come to terms with certain sacrifices we might need to make, but these sacrifices we are making, they need to make sense to us. So this is not about throwing away our boundaries. This is not about, okay, I'm just going to be a victim and a martyr, right? And whatever happens, I'll just take it. But it's more about, okay, if you're willing to sacrifice or letting go of certain things or making concessions, what is the eventual purpose of that? So, for example, in the book, I wrote about this story. This is a client. He was doing a very overwhelming job. But at the same time, he really loved the fitness and he wanted to open his own gym. And he said, I don't know if I should do this. He was hesitating and all that. And he put out this card, and I said, what did you just tell me the name of your gym that you're thinking about? And he said, oh, what did he say? Fitness, something, Achilles Fitness. That was the name he was thinking about. And I said, there you go. It's like the sacrifice you do have to make in order for Achilles, for your gym. And perhaps you need to either think about how you need to transition to become an entrepreneur, to run your own fitness career, rather than being stuck in a bank job that you have no passion for. And you're just waiting for the right moment. And so that's how the reading started, right? When we put out this card. And I don't think this card is just telling us that, okay, everything you want, you just need to sacrifice everything else to do that. But it's more about understanding what you're sacrificing for and what is the purpose there. And in order for you to get that, how much are you willing to sacrifice? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that that's a great way to talk about sacrifice, because I think sacrifice, the word sacrifice come from Latin, to make sacred,
Yeah. Okay.
so we think about sacrifice as a bad thing, but it is how, which is why people is like, oh, you make a sacrifice to the gods, you make a sacrifice to God, you make a
Mm.
sacrifice to the spirits. It is really, you make something sacred. It is something that you're offering up in exchange. So what is the exchange that is happening, right? It's a
100%. Yeah.
sacrifice. And is it worth it?
Yeah.
Because a lot of the times we make sacrifices or exchanges that are not worth it. So it's like, in the mythology of Odin, when he sacrifices his eye to,
Yeah. Yeah.
gains
And then
the
hands
wisdom,
up upside down. Yep.
yeah, he
Yep.
gains the wisdom of magic, the runes, etc. All these things. Obviously, in the different myths vary whatever happens there,
Mm.
but it is about a sacrifice, right? And even in the Egyptian mythos, or
Mm.
Mithraistic mythos, or Christian mythos of Jesus, like the sacrifice of Jesus, etc. It's all about what is the result of this, and why are you doing this exchange. And I think that the exchange part of it is, I think, is very key for everybody that's watching.
Yep.
how make sure that whatever sacrifice you're making is worth
Mm,
it, and
mm,
know that always the sacrifices are something that you have the agency to say
mm.
yes or no
Yeah.
depending on what it is, right? I
Yeah.
think that that's a big part of it.
I find it very interesting that you just pulled out that card actually, because we're actually having Saturn in transit in
Yeah,
Pisces,
yeah.
right?
I was gonna mention I was gonna mention that.
Yeah,
Yeah, but you
and
go
then
ahead.
we get this Pisces energy, and we're looking at sacrifice. So I think maybe this could be not just for our audience, but maybe this is a universal theme.
Mm,
So, Saturn is about, what we are working hard for, and later we might have the reward from Saturn. And so Pisces is about that sacrifice, right? So for everyone who is out there, what are you sacrificing for? And, and there will be a reward there as long as you know what you're doing. I think this is perfect message. Thank you
yeah,
for putting that card.
oh, of course. And I think my friend that is also an astrologer, he says, that it is this the reward will be of as much work you put into it. That's how the reward. That's how Saturn brings the reward too.
Yeah, yeah.
I might be paraphrasing it wrong, but but the topic of it is like it's like what if you have skin in the game, then
Mm,
that's how you're gonna be rewarded,
yeah,
as well.
yeah.
So it's not a time for like things are just gonna come easy and without any work.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so and I know we are a little bit over time, but we started a little bit later. But I don't want to
Mm,
keep you a long time. But I do want to ask you two questions. Number one is, as I said earlier and again, this for people that are just watching or what will watch this later, everybody should go get the Oracle of the Mystic Heroes, because it is, even if you're not into reading cards and you just want to learn the the mythology, and you just want to learn the and get some wisdom that is not necessarily related to divination, but just get some daily wisdom that you can
mm,
have some clarity, have some thoughts and some meditations on. You should get it, because it is a very easy to follow, but also deep working deck. And the images are beautiful also, and I like the size of the cards as well, and the card stock, so it's very durable as well. But I do want to ask you, as I mentioned earlier, because I've seen your posts about the dragon and stuff like that. In a nutshell, if you can say something to the people that are watching, what
mm,
can they expect, or what should they look into
mm.
during the year of the dragon, right?
Of dragon, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what is interesting about the year of dragon in Chinese astrology is that dragon is the only animal that actually does not exist in our
No,
world. All the other
in the real
11,
world, yeah, yeah, like
right?
in the physical.
Exactly, right? Yeah, but all the 11 animals, you can find them easily in a zoo, right? So dragon year carries a lot of mythic energy for Chinese people, to be honest, and we believe that it's a year of magic. And every year, when it comes to dragon year, you will see hospitals are booked because every mother wants to give birth during the dragon year. And so they also, this is a little bit like, the superstitious part of Chinese
Hmm.
culture. Yeah. And people tend to believe that, dragon babies, they are charismatic. They are powerful, right? They are, they're meant to be successful, et cetera, et cetera. And so, generally speaking, for us, we love Dragon Year because we think this is a year filled with power and momentum. And of course, yeah, we have to look at your individual, your animal signs to understand what the year means to you. But as a universal energy, I think this also works very well with Western numerology because this year, 2024, is a numerological vibration 8. 8, power, dragon power. Here we go. Okay, this is like the where we see the things are aligned. And so this year, I would say don't hold back. Put the pedal to the metal
I
and
love that.
manifest what you really want. Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
that, and yeah, the dragon itself, it is a very magical like creature in any form that you see it in different mythologies. It's also a creature that transcends mythology,
Yeah. Yeah.
whereas sometimes you see only a particular animal, a mythological animal, you only see it in
Mm,
one culture. The dragon, it's just
yeah.
different cultures as well. So I think that's amazing. And then my next question is, what's next for you? I know you have another deck coming out, so if you want to talk a little bit about that, and
Sure.
whatever else you wanna share.
Yeah. So the next deck is going to come out on the market in June this year. So with just in 3 to 4 months time, you definitely get a copy from me, Chris.
Thank you.
Yeah. So it's called Oracle of the Celestial Deities, and it's going to be quite similar. The concept again, this is based on Greek Roman mythology, but the second deck is heavily focused on the deities instead of the mortals. Yeah, and it's a smaller deck compared to this one. But I'm I will be talking about the deities and stories and archetypes, and this will be heavily related to astrology as well. Like for example, there is the sun, the moon, right, Mercury, Venus, Mars, and some of the other deities archetypes that is not related to astrology much. For example, we're taught in the book you will find Hephaestus or Vulcan, right? The god of metalcraft and volcano. You will find, let's say, Persephone, right? The queen of the underworld. And we don't really use those archetypes in astrology much, but I find them extremely important. So I think for people who are interested in astrology and also if they're interested in discovering more archetypes related to ancient Greek mythology, this is definitely the right deck for them. And I'm very proud of the artwork as well. I'm
It looks very cool. I saw. I mean, if people are watching, they can go see some of the samples on the website. Beyond Worlds, but I think on Amazon you can pre-order already,
yeah,
if I'm not mistaken.
yeah. I'm really
And
proud of the artwork. Yeah.
yeah, it looks great, and I think it also complements the other. I don't know what's gonna, but I think if it's gonna be the same size, it probably complements the
Yes.
other deck as well.
Yes.
So people can probably mix and the cards.
Thank you so much for mentioning that actually. So one of the intention that I have is you can actually use these two decks together. You can shuffle them together because we have the mortals, we have the deities. Now we have a whole picture of Greek mythology. And you can see, when you're using these two decks, you can actually see the correlations between the gods and the mortals. And I actually talked about this in the guidebook in the second deck.
Oh, there you
So
go.
yeah,
I'm a
yeah.
little sidekick,
You are! You are! You already know what I wrote.
But
Awesome. That's awesome.
yeah,
Yeah.
no, but that's
Yeah.
amazing. And I mean, I wish you continued success. I don't know if you have any other like a class or something coming up, or that you want to mention, or is it just to follow you on your social media and your
Yep.
website? So
Yeah, so just feel free to follow me on my Instagram, Latao Wang, and you can find Oracle of the Mythic Heroes on Amazon or Beyond Words Publishing's website. Yeah, and I look forward to having more fascinating discussions with
oh my God.
both Chris and any of our audience.
Of course, yes. Thank you so much for being here. I'm really grateful for your time. I know it's morning time, so you're speaking to me from the future, which is very funny. But I really appreciate the work that you do, and I really love your page as well. So admiration is mutual. So I want people to go follow Letao Wong here on Instagram. Turn on notifications so you know when anything new drops. Watch his videos because he does a lot. I think you also have a YouTube channel, no?
Oh no, I don't have a personal
Oh,
YouTube channel, but a lot of other
people
YouTubers they have interviews
people
with
have
me.
interviewed you.
Yeah,
That's why.
yeah,
That's why. Sorry, because
yeah. Mm.
I was watching Elliot's interview of you. I mean,
Yeah,
I was watching your chat with Elliot on his
correct.
YouTube. Sorry, that's what I mean.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. That's
but
his channel. Yeah, his channel.
yeah,
Yeah. Mm.
but they can see all your stuff on all your interviews on YouTube by with other people as well
Yep.
as your
Mm.
you write for different
Yeah,
magazines, etc. So
correct.
that's
Yeah.
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 So
Bustle.com, I'm a regular contributor to them, Bustle. And sometimes I write for Women's Health magazine and some other. I just had one published yesterday on a website called Just Breathe
there you
magazine. So
go.
some, yeah, mental health, that kind of, theme. Yeah. Yeah. So Good. Thank you so much, Chris.
Thank
Yeah.
you so much for,
Mm.
and I know this is your first Instagram live because you told me, so thank you for
Yeah.
for following the little video and stuff like that. I usually I think, oh, everybody knows how to do it, and so many people tell me like, I've never done an Instagram live. I'm like, I can't believe it. So thank
Yeah.
you so much. I really appreciate your time, and I wish you continued success, and I hope to talk to you when the other one comes out too. So
100%. Yeah. Look forward to that. Yeah. Have a wonderful night. Yeah. And I'll see you next time.
thank
Bye
you, you
bye.
too. Bye bye.